Former Trump advisor and now prominent MAGA podcaster Steve Bannon is headed to prison tomorrow as of when I'm recording this. This may be included in tomorrow's show, so maybe it's today for those of you listening and watching this. But Monday is Steve Bannon's day, going to prison for defying a congressional subpoena and being convicted of contempt of Congress, I should note. Here's this from NBC News. Then I'll show you him in an interview with ABC News' Jonathan Karl that gets pretty heated. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon must report to prison by Monday after the Supreme Court rejected his last-minute bid to stave off his 4-month sentence for defying subpoenas from the House January 6th committee. Bannon was convicted in Washington on 2 counts of contempt of Congress nearly 2 full years ago in July 2022. And sentenced to 4 months in prison in October of 2022. It goes through him trying to appeal it, trying to prevent it, delay. Finally, he actually has to go, and the Supreme Court was uninterested in helping him out. With that being said, this is the accountability that he deserves. He doesn't see it that way, and he's framing this as his own victimhood. We'll get to his farewell message. It's only 4 months, but okay. He's still going to prison. He doesn't have to take a break on his podcast, God forbid. And in this ABC interview, he was asked about something that he's said, which is the promotion of violence, specifically with Anthony Fauci. He didn't like this question at all.
Just days after the 2020 election, Twitter suspended Bannon's podcast. The episode also yanked from YouTube after he seemed to imply that Dr. Anthony Fauci and FBI Director Christopher Wray should be beheaded.
I'd actually like to go back to the old times of Tudor England. I'd put the heads on pikes, right? I'd put them at the 2 corners of the White House as a warning to federal bureaucrats. You either get with the program or you're gone.
A couple of days before, I was talking about the execution of Thomas More, when metaphorically they put it on the pike. That is a metaphor. In this town, Jonathan, and it's beneath you to bring it up. In this town.
No, it's not beneath me
in
to
this
bring it up
town,
because
in this town, you say, no,
let me just say
hang over a second. In this town, 1,000 times a day, people go, we got to put the heads on pike. We have to put his head on a pike. It was a metaphor.
You're saying at a time when Anthony Fauci and his family are facing death threats, when Christopher Wray and FBI agents all the way down are facing death threats, and you're going out and talking about putting their heads on pikes.
Millions of you out there, that's right, I see you, watch the show on a regular basis, but aren't yet subscribed. If you appreciate the work that we do, by clicking that subscribe button, you're showing you appreciate it and helping us continue to grow. Thank you so much. Back to it.
A total metaphor. Anybody understands that. That's your overreach. By the way, they banned us, I think, on Twitter. They banned us on Facebook for that. And hey, guess what? The show got even bigger. So not that we care. And I'm not backing off my rhetoric.
Are you concerned about those death threats, though?
That's not a. What do you mean, death threats?
No, in fact,
do you think I don't get? Do you think I don't get death threats and have security all the time? That comes when you play at the highest levels. It just comes.
So Bannon has long been someone who's promoted violence, and every single time that they do such things, promote such rhetoric, there's the plausible deniability of it was a metaphor, or I was just sort of being provocative, I didn't mean it, and no one's going to take it like that. And I would believe them, or at least I would be more inclined to believe them, if we hadn't already seen this exact group of people promote the exact audience that he's speaking to violence in the case of January 6th. So clearly, whatever metaphors you're speaking in, whatever provocative, obviously non-literal language you're using to express your outrage is being taken literally by people. As we heard very similar rhetoric before January 6th to what we're hearing now. And lately, Bannon has been saying victory or death. We'll see in one of these clips, them showing clips of him talking about this being like the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And whenever you make a combination of individual statements that maybe you could get away with arguing were metaphorical, but you make all of them constantly while talking about how the country is going to just not even be a country anymore if Biden wins this election and we gotta fight, you are being dangerous in your rhetoric. So Playing these semantic games is not something I think is productive. Here's more.
This will be easy. So this will be easy. Will you appeal right now, message to all of Trump's supporters, to respect the results?
Are you going to pull this
win
again?
or lose?
This is your question. Have you asked a Democrat this question? Yes or no? The answer is no. Have you asked a Democrat that question?
I haven't seen Democrats storm the Capitol to try to stop an election.
Have you heard what Jamie Raskin's saying about January 6th? That he would not, so the court ruled 9-0.
I have no problem asking Democrats if they're going to
respect the election. Then why don't you do it then? You've got no problem doing that. The only reason you're going to have it, we put a pitchfork in your back and say, why don't you ask Democrats? Ask some Democrats. Here's the bottom line. When this is adjudicated and reviewed, if they are certifiable, chain of custody, ballots and votes from American citizens, then, hey, whatever that outcome is totally fair. Until the time that we get that, all bets are off.
And I'm talking about violence. Will you say no matter what, no more violence? Who talks about violence? Well, let's just look at some of your language. You said
there is no coming together, just like in the Revolution and the Civil War. One side is going to win and one side is going to lose.
So Trump supporters. How's that violent? Just like the Revolution and the Civil War.
Well, no,
that was war.
No. But you're talking about the two great historical moments in our history,
which include a lot of bloodshed and violence.
You're talking about. Nobody could derive that we're calling for violence.
Okay, how about this?
Hold it, John.
Oh no. How about this?
We're winning at the ballot box. You know why? Over 50% of the American.
You're not. Since Trump came onto the scene, he won that one election, and then every election since has gone poorly for Republicans. So, stop it with that. But you can tell with how frantic Steve Bannon... No. That he clearly understands Jonathan Karl has him in sort of a corner. Because you can't combine the statements we've heard from Steve Bannon and derive any other meaning, as Steve Bannon was saying. Derive anything other than him promoting violence. For him, as I've said before, is it him thinking, gosh, I would just love to see violence? Probably not. Instead, he knows what is salacious, what is intriguing to listen to, what's provocative, what makes his audience feel those things that makes them feel like they got to keep watching him. And that feeling comes from rhetoric like that. And he doesn't care about the danger of it. And again, it would be one thing to be talking about this with no context. Maybe he just speaks in this sort of way to sound on his War Room podcast like he's a big, strong man. But we've seen where people like him, his exact rhetoric, he was one of the people, that's why he got subpoenaed by the January 6th committee, who was a part of creating the situation that led to the storming of the Capitol. So we've seen where this leads. He has no regard for the dangerousness of his rhetoric, and that is a crying shame. Here's another just sort of funny moment from this interview.
When I interviewed Bannon back in 2018, he predicted an astounding victory for Republicans, saying they would run the tables in the House. Instead, Democrats picked up 40 seats. And in 2022, he predicted a massive blowout for Republicans. Instead, they lost most of the competitive races across the country.
So when he says that we're going to win at the ballot box and there's no way that Trump could lose fairly because the American people just love him so much, remember that his predictions have been wrong. When you live in the MAGA bubble and you think everyone just can't get enough of Trump, maybe it is confusing that he lost in 2020. That 2022 didn't go the way that Republicans were expecting because of MAGA. That 2023 special elections have shown a Democratic Party overperforming again and again in the era of Trump. Maybe that is confusing. Maybe if Biden wins in November, that'll be confusing too. Your confusion because of the bubble you live in is not justification for denying reality. And very importantly, is not justification for violence. Just know there are millions of Americans out there, including myself, and most of my entire audience, unless you're a hate watcher, who feels profound confusion that a single person other than Trump would support Trump. His wife barely supports him. It's shocking to us. In the social spaces that I'm in, it is truly hard to believe that a single person would support Trump. But if he wins, I'm able to understand the world is bigger than myself and my experiences. MAGA, I would invite you to do the same. To try to put yourself in other people's shoes and realize, actually, there seems to be more other people's shoes out there where the story is they don't like Trump, if that makes sense, than you think. Here's Steve Bannon, again, just days whenever he recorded this. That interview came out just right before he reports to prison tomorrow. And here's sort of his farewell message.
Remember, and that's about this show, it's obvious what they're trying to do. They're trying to shut down. Alex Jones is going to be liquidated here in a couple of days, in all likelihood. Jim Hoft is in bankruptcy court, and they're hammering him. The Justice Department, you heard that, took it right over. Epoch Times is being hammered. Every conservative media outlet they raided James O'Keefe and dragged him out for what? Because of the diary, her diary, the Ashley Biden's diary, which is totally true. They tried to destroy
Illegally obtained?
Rudy Giuliani, Bob Costello, and myself over what? When the 51 intelligence officers came forward and said that the laptop from hell was Russian disinformation. That's a bald-faced lie. These people will shred the Constitution. They will shred every law. They will look you in the eye and lie to you because you know what?
Which side's candidate called for the termination of the Constitution again?
They don't.
Yeah, so I wish I could quickly think of a good analogy, but instead we'll just use this. It's actually not logical to just go through and cite a bunch of conservatives. I don't even like using that term. Let's just say a bunch of MAGA people who are being quote unquote gone after by law enforcement organizations or having trouble in civil court. When each one of those individual instances you can look at and see laws that were violated or justification for civil cases being brought against them. In the case of, I think you brought up Alex Jones. And the very laws that are applicable and thus the justification for them being enforced when these individual people did the things they did. And maybe just stop breaking the law? Is that scandalous for me to say? Don't break the law, don't be a criminal. Maybe that could help you out, Law and Order people. And yeah, you can look at the law. The law is something you can check out and see before you do something. If you're gonna break the law, you could Google, is this against the law? And then they get mad when they're held accountable. No. Now, I'm gonna show you this Megyn Kelly, another one of his final interviews, and then I have a little rant for you.
Questions back to our earlier discussion of what do the Republicans do now? We're not talking about, when you and I are talking about fighting fire with fire, we're not talking about finding innocent people and accusing them of crimes they haven't committed just because we don't like their politics. There's plenty of criminals over on the Democratic side who don't get prosecuted because we're following norms where we don't normally go after them. There's a question right now, the GOP-controlled House is looking into whether the president's son, Hunter, and the president's brother, James, should face potential perjury charges. And while this DOJ is not going to pursue them for that, those charges don't expire.
Quickly, I say this with love, just pulsing through my heart. Steve Bannon looks so disheveled. Okay, that's it.
Until 2029. Andy McCarthy was pointing this out in a recent piece. And so we could have a Trump administration that really has to ask itself whether those two should be held to account. To me, that's...
I'm sorry, one more visual thing. I hate to do this. Why do you have 3 pins on your shirt, sir? What? Just at any moment, he's ready. 1 pin fails, throw it out, grab the second pin. What? Okay. You're... Okay. Last thing, in the interview with Jonathan Karl, he had just stacks of papers. Why do all these conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones and Steve Bannon insist on having stacks of binders and papers all over their desk as if they're just constantly researching the nonsense that they clearly think of in the moment just to spew that seems the most provocative? All right, that's it. 3 pens, lots of paper. Here we go.
That's where the fight should happen. It's fair game. If you're going to pick Steve Bannon and you're going to get Peter Navarro and you're going to get Trump of all, he's of course the greatest example, then the other side has to pay. They have to pay or they won't learn. They're not above board. They're not highbrow. They only understand bare-knuckled politics. And I don't know where it stops. I don't know how far out of control we have to get before the lesson's been learned. But what do you think? How far down that lane do we go without completely sacrificing the republic?
First off, it all has to be legitimate inside the constitutional rule of law, obviously. But they're so egregious. This is why people, I think, feel you have to step up and you have to fight fire with fire. Otherwise, they're going to continue to roll. Look, as we speak right now, Anna Paulina Luna has a proposal to put on the floor today. Now, it's not going to come today, but we understand the speaker is working with her to put it forward on a charge of inherent contempt, since they don't believe the attorney general will actually go after and prosecute anybody in justice, in the Department of Justice, about and particularly Matthew Graves, the DA, the U.S. attorney for.
All right, I'm just sort of bored with what he's saying. But as a final, did I say I was promising I was done with the visual things? Because it's not important. But if it's still on screen, Cole, make sure it is. For someone who apparently has just a gargantuous audience, that is a janky setup. Look at that. Just a piece of cloth pinned to the wall is his backdrop. All right, that's it. That's it. Back to the important stuff. Steve Bannon and Megyn Kelly are having this conversation about fighting fire with fire. What do they mean? Well, it's sort of incoherent because they both say we should do to them what they're doing to us, but also we wouldn't do it unfairly. But the whole premise of your argument about Trump is that it's unfair, because then otherwise, if it's not unfair, what's wrong with prosecuting a former president if they actually broke the law? So obviously, if Trump broke the law, then what is being quote unquote done to him is good. The only argument that you're making that would make it not fair is if there wasn't a violation of the law there that would cause a need for prosecution. So that means doing to them what they're doing to us in your world means going after people who shouldn't be gone after. But then Steve Bannon responds to Megyn Kelly and goes, but we would always only do it within the rule of law. So if you're saying we would only, is not what they mean, but he's pretending like we would just go after people who've obviously broken the law, and that is somehow fighting fire with fire. I'm good with that too. If you can find evidence that Democrats broke the law, like it seems like Bob Menendez did, and he's at trial right now, the Democratic senator, then yes, hold them legally accountable. Hunter Biden, presumably a Democrat, he broke laws related to obtaining a firearm. He was convicted on crimes related to that. We actually believe in the rule of law, but this weird Megyn Kelly argument of let's go after them until they stop going after us, but it wouldn't be unjustly going after them, but it would be something different than what law enforcement's doing now. I don't understand that argument. So let me say this, and this is my new point that I want to have people say far and wide. So share it around, say it yourself. Go for it. If they're saying they want to try to, for example, indict Joe Biden, or get some, as Charlie Kirk has articulated, a Republican district attorney to prosecute a Democrat on the crimes they believe these Democrats have committed. Go for it. Try. Do it. One of the reasons they haven't yet, one of the reasons they can't even get an impeachment, much less criminal prosecution of Joe Biden, is because he didn't do the things that they're pretending like he did. Do you know why? Even if you believe Alvin Bragg was politically motivated, do you know why he got a conviction? Because there were violations of the law there. So try. Because in our system, you need evidence to bring in a court of law, to present in front of a jury, to withstand appeals afterwards. that is compelling enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone broke the law. And you don't have that on Joe Biden because he's not corrupt like Trump is. You don't have that on the random people. BLM, the organization, I guess, is what Charlie Kirk was listing, or whoever else they have in mind. You don't have it. He lists 51 former intelligence officials. Is that the phrase? Try. Because even if you're mad at them for telling what you perceive to be a lie, you're not going to get a criminal conviction because someone said something you don't like politically. And any of these Republican district attorneys or a potential Republican attorney general, while it would be very destructive, they wouldn't have the evidence. They would feel embarrassed by the prospect of bringing an indictment against some of these individuals they want to see retribution against. Now, there is a future where they so deteriorate the entire system that we see something horrific where without due process, without our system playing out, someone's put in jail. So that is just your nightmare. But them talking about going through a lawful prosecution and bringing someone into a trial and all that, I'd like to see them try. And I'd like to see these individuals be embarrassed by the fact that they can't prove criminal wrongdoing like the prosecutors are able to do against Trump. So they're wrong. They're just wrong about Trump being unjustly prosecuted. But even if they believe that, I'd like to see them try because they don't have the evidence they think they have. And that's a big takeaway as well. Let me know what you thought of that in the comments. And if you want to get an extra episode of the show daily, you can do so by clicking the join button below.